Welcome back to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Latin reading course. In this second lesson, we'll study verses 6 through 10 of chapter 1 of the Gospel of St. John. In verse 6, we read, Fuit homo missus a Deo, qui nomen erat Ioannes. The verb fuit translates simply as was, but in this sentence we'll translate it as there was. Homo. Homo is a substantive noun, and we saw this noun in lesson 1. We saw the form hominum, which meant of men. Here we see homo, which translates as man. We'll add the article a man in the context of this sentence. So fuit homo, there was a man. Missus. Missus is a participle. It translates as sent. Think of a missionary as someone who is sent. The word missionary comes from this word missus. Fuit homo missus. There was a man sent. A is a preposition that means from. And then Deo is another form of the word Deus, which we saw in lesson 1. Fuit homo, there was a man, missus, sent, a Deo, from God. Qui. Qui is a pronoun that means for whom. It refers back to homo. For whom, nomen, the name, erat, was, Ioannes. Ioannes is the Latin form of the English name John. There was a man sent from God, for whom the name was John. In verse 7 we read, Hic venit in testimonium, ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine, ut omnes crederent per illum. The verse starts with the pronoun hic, which is another form of the pronoun hoc that we saw in lesson 1. Hic is masculine and means this. It refers back to homo. So there was a man sent from God. Verse 7, this man, we're not going to add man in our translation, but it's understood that hic, this, refers back to the man in verse 6. Venit is a verb. It means came or he came. Hic venit. This man came in testimonium. This man, or just this, came in. Here we'll translate in as for, and testimonium is a testimony. This man came for a testimony. Ut, so that. Testimonium, a testimony. Perhiberet. Perhiberet is a verb that translates as he might give. When you get into Latin grammar, this is an example of an imperfect potential verb. Ut testimonium perhiberet, so that a testimony he might give. De lumine. De is another preposition. It means about in this sentence. About lumine, the light. Hic venit in testimonium. This came for a testimony, so that ut, a testimony, perhiberet, he might give, de lumine, about the light. Ut, so that, omnes. Remember in lesson 1 we saw omnia. This is the same word, just a different form. Omnes, so that all crederent, might believe, per, through, illum, him. This man came for a testimony, so that a testimony he might give about the light, so that all, and by this we mean all men, crederent, might believe, per illum, through him. In verse 8 we read, non erat ille lux, sed ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. Non erat means not was, and ille means he. Not was he, lux, the light. Sed is a conjunction that means but. Not was he, John, the light, but ut, so that testimonium, a testimony, perhiberet, he might give, de lumine, about the light. Verse 9, erat lux vera, quae illuminat omnem hominem venientem in mundum. Erat lux vera. We'll translate erat here as it was. Lux, the light, vera. Vera is an adjective that means true. Lux vera, light true, or true light. It was the true light. It was the light true. Quae, which. Illuminat, illumines. Omnem, every. Hominem, man. Omnem is another form of the adjective that we've seen as omnes and omnia. Here, omnem is in a singular form. It refers to hominem, the next word, which means man. Omnem hominem, every man. Hominem is another form of the noun homo. Venientem. Venientem is a participle that means coming. It's a form of the verb venit, which we saw up in verse 7. Venientem, coming in mundum, into mundum, the world. Erat lux vera, it was the light true, which illuminat, illumines or enlightens, omnem hominem, every man, venientem in mundum, coming into the world. And lastly, verse 10, in mundo erat, et mundus per ipsum factus est, et mundus eum non cognovit. In mundo, in the world, erat, he was, or it was. It refers back to the lux of verse 9. In mundo erat. Et mundus, and the world, per ipsum, through him, factus est, made is. Et mundus, and the world, eum, him, non cognovit, not, did know. In mundo erat, in the world he was, et mundus per ipsum factus est, and the world through him made is, et mundus eum non cognovit, and the world him not did know. If you study this video and the text of the lesson, you'll be able to master the translation of verses 6 through 10. If there are any differences between what I've said in the video and what's written in the printed lesson, you should study the printed lesson for the sake of passing the online assessment. In translation, there's a lot of flexibility. There are many different ways to translate languages from one into another. That's one of the reasons why God has given us the church, to protect us from confusion caused by translations. But, as I said, if there's any difference between what I've said in this video as I've gone through the translation and what's written in your lesson, stick to the written lesson. This video should be helpful, and if you continue to work through your Latin to English and English to Latin translation exercises, you'll be able to master verses 6 through 10, here of chapter 1 in the Gospel of John. I hope that you've enjoyed this second lesson in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Latin reading course. Here we've studied verses 6 through 10 of chapter 1 of the Gospel of St. John. In our next lesson, we'll move on to verses 11 to 15. God bless your studies.